Move to place items in the federal insured funds.
Okay, we're live.
Okay.
There.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, March 15th, 2022. The time is 5:05 p.m. And I would like to call to order the Committee of the Whole, the 2022 budget hearings. The first item on the agenda is the Chairperson's roll call. My name is Basha Adamzak, 7th Ward City Councilwoman, and to my right,
Councilman Mike Ray.
Very friendly Fire Chief.
Kyle Isaac, Finance.
Tito Brown, Mayor.
Jimmy Hughes, 2nd Ward Councilman.
Karen Sumner, WFMJ.
Jennifer Ossinger, Assistant Clerk.
John R. Squires, resident.
Anita Davis, 6th Ward Council.
joining us via Zoom is Councilman Anita Davis, Council President Tom Hetrick.
I'm here.
City Clerk.
The second item on the agenda is the department budget review. The first one is the fire department. Chief Finley.
This is not on the agenda as the first item.
No. Yeah, the first item is we have fire followed by police.
I'm sorry, he wanted to go over that first, I just didn't title it, he wanted to start with the overall numbers, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Kai.
Okay, if you turn to the first page, I originally gave you this on the February 22nd meeting. And in that meeting, that top column across to the right had a balance of available funds of $812,000. As a result of adding the police and fire budget with the changes that are going to be recommended tonight with regards to payroll, that remaining funding source has now, in essence, been used to, in essence, accommodate the costs associated with bringing on those additional employees within those two operations. So as of right today, the budget is in balance, but the room that is left that I have to certify that revenues exceed total expenditures is that column on the far right. So right now, if there is going to be any proposed increases, there's going to be a requirement of reductions to put this budget back into balance because there is only $22,000 available that's not appropriated. And that is the case down all those government operating funds. And then, of course, when you get lower to the bottom, you're going to see the large balances in the enterprise funds. And that is a result of, one, the fact that we last year diverted those $10 back into the water fund, and then the fact that we received that $7.5 million reimbursement from OWDA, and we are raising rates as a result of the fact that we have a higher debt level service requirements in the out years. But I want to make you all aware that the documents that we have been reviewing, the whole overall budget is in balance. I just want to highlight, though, that based on where we are tonight, there is only these small amounts that are remaining, that if there's going to be changes, this is what we can live within. But if we decide to go outside of that, we're going to have to make cuts to be able to meet the requirements of submitting a balanced budget. Are there any questions on the document?
You're saying between the general fund and then the police and the fire fund, how is that balanced with it's different figures? How does that work?
How does it get balanced?
No, where did the money come from?
If you went back on the original report that was shared, the same document on this February 22nd, we had $813 still available, $813,000. That $813 now has been used to accommodate the cost of the 10 additional hires that we're talking about in police and the 10 additional hires we're talking about in fire. So in essence, we've used up those reserves to accommodate this increase in workforce that we are going to discuss tonight with you.
Yeah, I get that. But police fund, when you gave, what was the figures the first time around in that fund?
On the police fund, we had $68,000 left.
So this this extra money just came right out of the general fund? Or-
Yeah, so it had to come as a general fund transfer, and that's why the general fund transfer shrunk, because the police fund wouldn't be able to accommodate it by itself. Remember, we moved all of our reserves, you always move them into the general fund and then distribute them from the general fund to those funds in need. And as a result of the changes in the employment totals, we needed to divert more because it would have been in the red, but then the general fund would have been sitting in the black. So, and again, fund accounting, you move those resources, so both of those funds show that they're in the black, and that's what the remaining balance in cash is on your far right.
Councilmember, did you have?
So that's, through the chair, Council, that's 20 additional,
To the chair.
10 in each.
Correct, that's what we're going to be discussing, yes. I had off of the baseline that I had started on January 1, because the baseline is how I put together the original document that we shared back on February 22nd. So that baseline is increasing by those 10 that I'm talking, that we're going to propose tonight to council to consider.
Do you have those head counts for each?
Yes, you have a page that leads on each of those that you should see exactly. Right there and on your left, you should have that for police and for fire.
So it's 146 grand total for police and 122 for fire.
I need to get to that, just give me a second to get into my report. Sorry, 1 second. The police, yes, we're talking about police officers at 146, and the number for fire, you're going to talk about yes, 122 when it comes to firefighters, and of that 122, 116 are actually firefighters. Because remember, the chief and 1 lieutenant, as you see there, does not fight fires, and I say because going to fires, and then you have your inspectors and your chief arson investigators. So that's the number you want to discuss when you're talking about firefighters.
If I may, through the chair, and these are close back to historic levels then?
To the chair. They're not close to historic levels. We have been slowly graduating by reducing numbers over the years. So no, we are.
Let me rephrase that, close to the agreed upon levels that we had talked about in recent times.
To the chair, that is correct.
I guess through the chair, what the new normal is and what we had some, I know with police, we lost a lot of officers, and we back up to where we had agreed upon level.
To the chair. This budget is based off of where we were as of January 1, then adding 10. We're actually, on the police side, when we discuss it, lower than that number right now, because we have people who have left since the baseline was created. So there's actually going to be additional hiring, but the baseline is the number that we're discussing on paper tonight.
So if I may, through the chair, again, what is that number? We lost a lot of police, we lost fire. What is the number that we are targeting on each of those?
We just discussed it. That's what's on these forms tonight. So right now,
So they're not going to say they want more, or we're still, you only gave us 10, we need 15.
no, these, based on the administration, these are the numbers that we are projecting, or we are suggesting to you that we can fund, and that we are going to, in essence, hire up to these levels.
Thank you for those clarifications. Thank you, Basha.
Through the chair,
Yes, Mayor.
if I could just say, what we look at, Mike, is we try to figure out through both these department heads, they have the highest attrition rate, and we're just trying to have a number where we're really just trying to stay at a baseline. Like I said, when we started this year, we had a number of 140. We probably had 3 people go. So we try to get a baseline. We want to stick to that. The chief knows every time when someone leaves, you keep at the 116. So we're going to try to keep a baseline and not try to fall under there. But this is probably where we're going to live for the new normal right now.
Through the chair, thank you. That does make sense with when you're seeing attrition and people drop off. I mean, bringing in 10, you might net 8.
Yeah.
In both those scenarios. So I'm good with that number. Thank you for the explanation.
Councilman Hughes.
Just quick here. Doing, both departments negotiation, was there any numbers negotiated in either fire or police as to minimum or staff?
Mr. Chair, the city will not commit to any minimum staffing levels because in essence, that takes away management's rights.
I just need to know if they talked about it, even though I think that police department should not have it. No offense, chief.
Are you guys ready to move forward to
If you have
discuss
no
the
more
fire?
questions, yes, you're ready.
Okay, chief.
Okay, through the chair. You see on your first page, we still maintain the 7 fire stations that the city had ever since we closed. It was 8, we closed station 7. So now we're down to seven stations. And we also still have our class 2 ISO rating, which nobody takes into consideration, the seriousness of our city's ISO rating. We actually went up to a 3. But after our guy that does our ISO rating, I gave him some more numbers, some more figures, and we actually came back down to a 2. The reason that it is so important, nobody thinks about it, is when we start closing fire stations, then you leave an area uncovered by fire protection, and that's going to cause another truck to have to increase his response times. Well, if our ISO right now we have a 2, which is phenomenal. It was started with Chief O'Neill, and I'm continuing it. But if we start closing fire stations, even if we do it like I'm doing it now, what'll end up happening, once our ISO rating starts going up, you're talking anywhere, now for the residents, probably wouldn't be that big a deal. But for all these commercial buildings downtown, you're talking about anywhere from 3.5% to 7% that their property insurance is going to go up. So that's pretty significant when you talk about all these huge commercial buildings that we have downtown. So I asked for the amount of men or the amount of firefighters so that we will limit the amount of times that fire stations close. That's huge for me for that reason also, because I need bodies on the ground. I need boots on the ground. When that bell hits, I need bodies on the ground to go in there and do what only the Youngstown Fire Department can do. That being said, this year in 2022, I would like.
I'm sorry, Chief. Councilman Davis.
Yes, to the chair. Chief, what is the ISO rating, if you know it, of Akron?
ISO rating? I couldn't tell you. I don't know. It's easy to find out, but I don't know.
Well, I'm going to want you to find that out for me, because I understand when you're talking about the ISO rating and everything else, but I also understand that we just don't have pockets that are that deep any longer. That is also the reality. And if we don't get our pockets in order, our finances in order, rotating a fire station closing will be the least of our problem. So I'm going to want to know what was the effect of Akron when they Canton, when they started rotating the closing of their fire stations, the city of Canton, because they rotate regularly. And I want to know what their ISO rating is and how it was affected by that rotation.
Copy that.
Thank you. Chief.
I'm the third page where it says my department need. As Kyle stated, I'm looking to hire 10 new firefighters to go to the ranks. That will help us tremendously. Right now we have, I'm trying to balance the turns as even as I possibly can. Right now we have 34 people on each turn. Now, of course, that doesn't include anybody reporting off, or like on A turn, I have 3 people on A turn that are injured. Brian Charles, he's the one that got burned. Tony Burnett, he when they had that Dollar Tree fire on Mahoney Avenue. He's still off for that. And I have KP O'Neill. He tore a calf muscle stepping on the hose as he was going down the stairs. So I have 3 people off on IOD. You have to understand how the fire department operates. We have, at any given time, we have up to at least 7 people off a day. And that's because we have to, because of vacations and because of how the fire department works. 1 day on and 1 day on and two days off. There's FLSA standards that we have to adhere to so that they don't accumulate a lot of FLSA. So in that being said, in order for that to happen, we have to have an RH day. Every 6 weeks, we have to have an RH day. And our RH day basically is a day off with pay. That's all it is. Nothing more, nothing less. It's a day off with pay. But we have to have it by law because of FLSA standards. So that being said, we already have 7 people off a day. Mostly starting in the summertime, in the warmer months, we have those many people off. So this added 10 firefighters, 3 on each shift, is going to help us tremendously to seriously cut down on the amount of stations that close. That is going to seriously cut down on it. Plus the firefighters are going to step up, because this is going to be something that is going to increase morale big time, because it's been so long since we have hired, and we're down quite a few firefighters as of today.
About a year ago, maybe a little longer, you said the reason why the station was closing down, because you had enough firefighters, but they were sickening. They were not coming to work. I'm not going to try to describe the tone of that, but that's what was right in this meeting. When you were talking to us about your station's closing. And I get those emails, they close often, but it wasn't because you were short of guys, because the guys were almost intentionally. I'm not saying you said that, but it appears that the impression was they were intentionally taking off sick, and closing down the station down. I appreciate that firefighters are excellent and they're well trained. That's always good to hear. But we also was told that, you didn't need more firefighters, you just need the ones you had.
And that is extremely true. That is extremely true. But also think about, from the time I became fire chief to present, I'm down 19 firefighters that have left. So that is significant for us. That is significant. And yes, I will stand by the fact that, yes, we are severely short-staffed. And if the firefighters that are here, that can come, if they would come to work, a lot of the times we wouldn't have to close fire stations. But again, I can't control them control them reporting off. But this additional firefighters is going to help with that morale for them to want to come to work, because being down 19 people might not seem like a lot, but on the fire ground, it's all hands on deck, and we need that, and we've been needing that for quite some time. 19 people in the fire department is a lot, and I'm imagining, I'm just saying, and I know I'm not speaking out of turn, but I'd imagine before this year's out, I'm going to be down 2 more. That's 21. That's pretty significant.
Just follow. I agree with you 100% that 19. I don't look at it as a minor number. I get that, I just want a little clarity on your explanation of why we were closing down. You put that in your last page, that it was closing down because we were kind of short. And I think you put it right. So, as opposed to we have enough.
And that was a problem. That was a problem, and that is a problem. But them seeing these numbers is going to help increase morale, so that's going to limit that from happening. Since I've been fire chief, we're losing people, not replacing them. And in a business like ours, both police and fire, you might not think so, but morale means everything. Morale keeps things moving, and when it's lower, And I got a fire department that's more than 50% young guys. And they're worried. So I get it. I stand with them, I stand by them, that this number, if given to us, is going to drastically help us out of this hole that we're in and increase morale.
If I may just follow up, you saying you're down 19, but you're asking for 10?
You give me 19 if you want. Don't get it twisted. You can give me the 19. I'll take the 19. But I'll take what I can take. I'll take what I can get. 10. 10 helps us. 10 helps us. It really does. 10 helps us.
So why you put them out there?
10 helps us. It helps us. It does. It does. The other needs we have, as you see, we have our SCBA bottles.
Anita?
Through the chair, and how much would 10 firefighters cost the city of Youngstown?
Through the chair, in the budget right now, I have it for 9 months at $278,000. If you give me a moment, let me open up the spreadsheet. I will be able to tell you what that number would be for the full year or so. Can I circle back and let the chief continue, and I'll come back because I got to open it up to find that out. Just give me a moment.
Okay. The other department needs that I have, as you see, number 2 is the SCBA bottles. Those are the bottles that we take in into a structure fire that's on our back. Every 5 years, they have to be hydrostatically tested to ensure that the safe operation of those tanks. If they fail, obviously, then we'd have to buy a new one or new ones, as they fail. But every 5 years, it's the law, NFPA, that they should be tested every 5 years. Number 3, the ice rescue suits. That's kind of self-explanatory, but I wanted 4 because the city of Youngstown has not quite a few, but we have bodies of water between McKelvey Lake, between Crandall Park. I don't know what that one in the Mill Creek Park is called.
Glacier.
Lake Glacier. So at any given time, if we had to effect a rescue out on the ice, these suits are what we're going to need, because we're not going to wear our turnout gear, and obviously we're not going to wear clothes in the wintertime to go out to effect the rescue. But these ice commander suits, what they enable us to do is get fully encapsulated, go out to effect the rescue without the firefighters getting hypothermic. Yes, sir.
Councilman Ray?
Through the chair, are these ice suits like the hazmat suits that are fitted to a particular person? They're not as complicated. I mean, they're not as technical like a hazmat suit, isn't it?
No, it's not like a hazmat suit, but it's pretty much one size fits all. Okay. It's pretty much one size fits all, but you completely encapsulate yourself. You don't take off your clothes. You're in your clothes. Right. Take off your shoes. You zip yourself up in it, and once you zip it, it's completely waterproof. The only place that's open is your face. So if you put your head on the water, then yes, water can go in. But if you stay above that, you can be in the ice for
Through the chair, it's just a dry suit, it's similar to one of those.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Not as exotic as Councilman Hughes from the East Side.
And I dove in McKelvey Lake, I dove in Lake Erie. Wow.
I didn't know you were a diver.
Yeah, I'm SSI certified.
Very good.
In my neighborhood, that stands for something different.
A lot different. He's in the same neighborhood, so.
SSI certified.
Older school, man.
I apologize.
We're like, Kyle?
Through the chair, to address Councilwoman Davis's question. This cost for these 10 firefighters, and again, this is just their wages. Their wages for 12 months will be $416,000 if they weren't for a full calendar year. And then that number will, of course, increase next year, because once they achieve their full 1 year, they then take a next step up. And as you are aware, we negotiated those changes. So they'll go from $41,600 to start, and in year 2, under the new contract, they will jump up to let me backtrack. I apologize. I was looking at the police officers. The firefighters for a full year will be $371,450. They will go from $37,145 in their first year, and then their second year they will be at $39,145. So we'll just with the step process for those 10, if all 10 were hired for a full year, it'll be an additional almost $30,000 just in wages because of the graduated step increases that we've renegotiated. But remember, this is just wages, not pension, not Medicare, and not medical insurance. That's why when you look at what I share with you on that first page that we looked at, it's not just taking into consideration the wages of these employees. You have to take into consideration their pension costs, their medical insurance costs, and then their ancillary benefits. That's why we used up all of that was still available since that last meeting where I shared the document, and why all we have is $22,000 of room left, because of these costs are quite high for full-time employees.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Cal, at your opportunity, follow up, Chairperson?
Yeah, Benita.
Yes. So when you get a chance, I would like to get a full workup of 10 firefighters with benefits at the minimum levels. I think it's important for the public to, so often we hear if they would just manage the money correctly. And I think sometimes we just have to remind people that the city of Youngstown is like your home. And if your income at home is reduced, you can't keep spending at the same level. And that's reality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
Chief?
Okay, through the chair. Number 4 is a rotor lift, and I need 2 of those. What those are, our mechanic, we have 2 ladder trucks. They're the biggest trucks that we have. We already have 4 of these, and what these are, it enables our mechanic to physically lift the trucks up so that he can work on them, work underneath them. Well, the 4 will lift a fire truck, a pump, but the 4 alone will not lift a ladder truck. A ladder truck is too heavy. So he's asking for 2 more so that, because anything that needs to be done as far as underneath the truck, Donnie's got to send that out because he can't work on his back for 4 or 5 hours working underneath the truck like he does a fire truck. So he has to send our ladder trucks out when something underneath goes wrong with the truck. But getting another one, getting 2 more lifts, now we have 3 lifts on every side that can adequately lift a ladder truck.
Councilman Ray.
To the chair, if I missed it, the cost of those lifts and what's the cost versus, do we lift the truck twice a year? If it's, our lift costs $100,000 and we're only spending $5,000 on sending them out, I mean, what makes sense? What does this pay for itself?
Actually, I believe
30,000, is that what you have?
yes, $30,000, but that's both lifts.
For 2 lifts?
Yes, that's $30,000 for both lifts.
Is that like the one Councilman Hughes has in his garage?
No. These lifts are actually mobile.
Okay.
These lifts are actually mobile. He slides them around where he wants them, puts them next to the tire, and connects them all in series and pushes one button, and they all lift the truck at the same time.
That seems like that makes sense.
Just $30,000 for big truck.
$30,000 for the lift for the truck. The ladder truck also $1 million.
I understand that, but
Doesn't seem like that much. I mean,
that's really seems $15,000.
And through the chair, if we look at the detailed breakdown of his budget, you're going to find that in the garage under equipment. That's the one item that's in the garage.
Thank you.
Okay, now, number 5, the Phoenix Outfitters. What this is $45,000 that it's gonna cost us. Yeah, $45,000. What this is, we just bought 2 new sets of turnout gear. Our firefighters are aggressive firefighters. When our fire gear gets ripped, torn, punctured, or whatever, to you it just looks like one garment. There's actually multiple garments on there, and one of them is a vapor barrier to keep us from getting steamed or keep us from getting burned. Now, NFPA does require us every single year to have your gear inspected, professionally inspected. Now, the battalion chiefs, the captains, they look over it. If I happen to look and see that Jimmy's gear is torn, during inspection or something, that's one thing. But every year, your gear is supposed to be professionally inspected and cleaned according to NFPA standards. Now, with this company, this Phoenix, this is the same company we bought the turnout gear from. They are going to do their inspection and cleaning, and this 45 grand also includes, if something happens, they repair the gear for, I'm not gonna say for free, but under this contract, the gear would get repaired. Now, to give you an idea of what it costs, I just sent out 5 sets of turnout gear from a fire that happened a month ago, and they were rips and torns, and it affected the vapor barrier. Just those 5 sets of gear is going to be $5,500 to fix. And you don't have any other choice but to fix them because it's the only protection that we have. But getting this warranty with the gear, and then the longer you go with every passing year, they do just like a car. They do depreciation of the gear and say, okay, and it'll get to the point they say, you know what, Chief, it's probably better that you replace this set of turnout gear versus repairing it. But right now, we're not there because we just bought this turnout gear. So every firefighter has 2 sets of gear. And so when something goes wrong, before we couldn't do that because if something happened to their gear, they only had 1 set. And then we would have to wait until this company sent us a loaner set of gear, which they would charge us for, and then send their gear off to get fixed, and then come back and then send that gear back.
Question. From what I understood, you said this is something that we should be inspecting the gear annually.
Yes.
But we haven't been? Okay, so this isn't like a new request.
Never. We and under John on there for 20 years, never did. But there again, at the same time, when I got on, we were required to buy our own gear. Now the city is buying our gear, so obviously you want to make sure that the gear that we got, that we're taking care of it, and it's being properly inspected. Because when you bought our first set of gear, we sent 15 sets out for Phoenix to inspect. Every single one of them, the vapor barrier failed. Every single one of them. So we didn't even finish inspecting. We just said, you know what? We have to get new gear.
Okay, and the annual inspection, this is just what's recommended, or like if it's not done, is there some kind of penalty? Like where are these guidelines coming from? Like it's just a recommendation?
NFPA governs the fire service, National Fire Protection Agency. It governs the fire service as far as everything. It governs us as everything. And inspecting your turnout gear, because let's face it, this is the same stuff that we wear when we go in, and it has to be on point. It has to be on point every single time. So when it gets a rip and a tear in it, that rip and tear has to be fixed. Because that part of the gear in the right conditions, if it fails, then you got a firefighter get burned.
So maybe you can't answer this. So how did we go 20 years not inspecting it? Like without some kind of repercussions or penalty? That's
a question you have to ask John O'Neill. I don't know. But I know because when we got on, we had to buy our own gear. I know I had my gear inspected because I knew the NFPA standards. So I had my gear inspected, but if you didn't get your gear inspected, you didn't get it inspected.
That's true. Jimmy?
I'm just trying to follow the purchase. You hire 10 more police and fire, and we buy gear for them, or
Yes.
you already have it?
No, we buy gear for them.
So is there anything in the budget for that?
You know what, actually, that's a good question. I don't know, I don't think so.
Through the chair, there is, because we don't have all the costs of what we did last year with all the trucks.
Okay.
Whatever that was called, what you want to explain to the chair, what you did with all the testing.
Kai, if you can speak up, because it's not
Sure.
picking up an audio, because the microphone's
You
over there
had all of
on
that
the TV.
testing operating supply. What did you do out of operating supplies? Last year, give me a second, I'll look up the vendor.
For our fire trucks?
Yes.
Oh,
What is
okay, yes, that went to Fallsway,
Yes.
Fallsway,
We don't have those costs.
Fallsway. Last year also, for the first time that I'm aware of, all of our trucks, according to NFPA, all of our trucks got sent over to Fallsway to be inspected the way a fire truck, and pump tested the way a fire truck should. And that was never done either. I can't speak as to why it wasn't done. No, he wasn't fire chief. He wasn't
fire chief.
I can't speak why it wasn't done, but it came at a pretty considerable cost, because we found out that a lot of our pumps were not pumping up to standard like it should. But again, that's in the past. This is what I'm doing going forward. I have to make sure that we're squared away.
Just to follow up, you're saying that it was in the equipment line with that extra price there?
It was an operating supplies.
Oh, you have to speak up.
It was an operating supplies, or I'm sorry, operating services.
And
You paid
would that
for
be
services.
the $390,000, would that be part of that, or no?
It was, I'm sorry, last page of the slide. Team chair. That is already in the other line items that were from last year's baseline that he's not going to be using. So those savings are there because those costs were one time to have all of those trucks inspected.
So what he's asking, this is all new, excuse me, Chair. It's $390,000, that's new money.
Through the chair, yes, all of that would be, and that's again, that 278 is for 9 months, but all the items down below under the firefighters are one time, other than potentially this fire gear inspection, which could be an annual new cost as part of his new baseline that will be established at the end of this calendar year.
And through the chair, he's right. The everything on here is pretty much a one, because we won't have to have the SCBA bottles tested again for another 5 years. We'll do that every 5 years. The ice rescue suits, we won't have to replace, we don't have to do those again, because we have 4, plus we already have 4 or 5 ones that were older that we have to get repaired. So we'll have 9 or 10 suits altogether. So we won't have to make that purchase again. But everything on here is going to be a one-time thing, except for the Phoenix Safety Outfitters. That's going to be a yearly cost of inspecting turnout gear.
Chief, I haven't looked forward yet to the wages. Since you're requesting 10 new firefighters, I'm assuming that overtime is going down, the request for overtime?
Yes. And that is how we are going to help pay for these new 10 firefighters, is because the overtime is going to go down. Now, it's going to go down one way or the other, but the overtime is going to go down.
How can you say that's how you're gonna help pay for it? The general fund is how you're gonna pay for it.
But taking consideration the overtime that we spent last year, if we don't spend that amount of money this year, then that help pay for the 10 firefighters. And barring something catastrophic happening, I can make that happen.
And I get to the chair, I get that too. I'm just saying, if you're below your normal, whatever you said, you need 90, you're saying that we're gonna cut the pay for the additional. You probably should try to, I don't know what to tell you, but you should do it. I take that back.
Well, I'll tell you.
Well, you need 10 extra people, that's what you do. And them like you pay for the last, how many you have. But I like it, you saying you're taking it from overtime, but same token, you really don't have to, staff your place like you should.
Okay, I check, scratch this 10, give me 19.
I'm not
Give me 19.
working with your thing, I'm just saying.
I'm cool with that.
I'm just saying, I want to be on your side here when you want to staff your fire department like it should be staffed.
Absolutely.
And not robbing Paul to pay Peter. That's all that I'm saying. That's just my opinion.
But I do understand that the city as a whole is going through change, and there's going to be a new. I get that, and I understand that everybody's got to have a slice of the pie, and we're going to do the best we can with what we got. The other 6, 7, and 8, that was all. I finally got an IT guy for the fire department, and these are Chris's requests. The IT equipment, that's something that is above my pay grade that he wants. But the 20 computers, our computers that we have in all the stations, those computers are at least 15 years old. They're at least 15 years old, but this is what we have to use to do reports, communicate back and forth. And Chris just said, we have to get new computers, upgrade our computers.
Last year we talked about this when we were doing that other thing, and I thought computers was rolled up in that. We had the IT.
I didn't have I need an IT person. I didn't get Chris until this year. Well, maybe this year or the very end of last year to now. I just got Chris.
I find it hard to believe that we're doing 15-year-old computers. It just really, I'm all for it. I'm just saying.
And the last thing is
Chris has come to the police department.
Yes, that's his last name. But yeah, he worked over with Rick Beekman in dispatch. The last thing is we also have iPads in the truck, and those iPads they're on their last leg. So when Chris came over to be our IT guy, he wants to get a test tablet for the truck to see. Our problem is I don't think, because the iPad has to be plugged in constantly, they won't turn them off, and they don't turn off by themselves. Those iPads are burning out, and we have spent quite a bit of money replacing iPads. Well, now that Chris is here, Chris found one that is a lot more rugged and durable. But instead of just buying them, he wants to buy one, put it on probably 7s or 2s, because those are our fastest and busiest trucks, and see how this tablet does, in the conditions. Now, the reason we have these tablets or iPads in the trucks, it gives us a lot of information when we get a call. Dispatch puts in the information and pushes it to everybody's tablet. So if, say for instance, we are conversion on this spot for a structure fire, the captains or the officers can hit a button and see where all the trucks are coming from converging on one spot. So can the battalion chief, so he'll know, okay, I know where my furthest truck is coming from. I can see on the computer where the first they're coming from. So I know what I'm going to have to do as far as strategy and tactics. It also gives us the where to, when we go out to do inspections, obviously no more paper inspection. You take that iPad and do a complete inspection on the iPad, and it goes to the central server. So there's a lot of things that we do with the iPads on the trucks instead of just having them sit there and do nothing. So we actually do a lot with our tablets.
Just to follow up, Chris has already dug into all of that.
Yes, Chris. I got all this stuff from Chris. Now, on everything I asked for, obviously, I want the firefighters to decrease our overtime. I understand that browned-out fire stations and our high overtime cost is not what any of us want. So we did need the 10 firefighters to help us reduce our overtime costs and reduce the amount of brownouts that we do.
Excuse me, can I? Because I'm looking at the actual numbers. So last year, we budgeted for 450,000 in overtime. And we used almost 1.1 million, okay? That's huge, okay? This year, the request is 600,000. Who's to say we're not going to realistically then double that, more than double and a half that as we did last year? Like what is your plan if we hire these additional firefighters, the call-offs continue, then what?
Then we will have no other choice but to brown out fire stations. And versus using overtime. And this is what I, as the fire chief, if you grant me these 10 firefighters, when I have my chiefs meeting, I'm going to hammer that fact home to my battalion chiefs that they need to tell these guys that, and let me say this. Yes, last year, our overtime budget was exceedingly high. But also last year, just on a turn, we have 3 turns, just on a turn, I had 4 people off, hurt, on IOD. I felt like I did not want to punish these guys by not, at the very least, a turn, I was allowing them to have at least minimum of 4 overtimes. Why? Because you got 4 people off. 4 people off while doing the job. And that cost a tremendous amount of overtime, and I know it, and I understand it. I just looked at it, I viewed it as, I'm not gonna punish these guys if they got hurt on the job, and then I'm gonna shut a truck down. The appearance didn't look right to me, to my firefighters. But also, last year also, I was down 19 people with no help in sight. Well, now this year, I'm getting 10 people. So therefore, thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate that vote of confidence.
We had that
Appreciate that, Jimmy.
the mayor, myself, and the chief is going to address that immediately, because he has to, because he knows it's going to take some time. We talked about what the numbers are through March, because we have actuals, what we're going to use for the remainder of the year. The chief understands that the message he's conveying to you, he's got to stick by that. He's going to go out and hire, but he's going to have to make some changes immediately, because those hires aren't going to start right away. And so, yes, you're going to see brownouts, but it's not brownouts because it's what we want. It's brownouts because for us to live within that number and then to go out and hire, there's going to be a window there that is going to create is having to manage it in this manner.
Through the chair, if I can, when you say you have these brownouts, is that the station where the shortage is at?
Yeah.
So you where the shortage is at, you might fill that station and cut down 6s and 12.
Let me try. No.
That's when
No. There was actually, when I first started brown out fire stations, I actually made a list, a primary and a secondary station closure. And it wasn't, obviously, I wasn't going to have 6s closed and 12s closed because they were both on the east side. So what I would do, if 6s on the east side was going to be the primary, then on the west side, it would be 3s or 15s. If we came to needing a second truck closed. And this is the list that the battalion, and I can email it to you. This is the list that the battalion chiefs are going off. So they know for this 2-week period, if a station needs to be closed, like right now, it's 9s. Right now it's 9s. And I believe at the end of this week, that primary will shift to another station. But I'm going to change that also. I'm gonna change that also. So.
And I'm sorry, may the record reflect that Councilman Julius Oliver has joined the meeting via Zoom.
I really don't see it.
Quick question, maybe this is more so to mayor and chief combined. What is the long-term plan? I've mentioned this a few times. I know we don't have the funding right now, but potentially moving to like 5 mega stations throughout the city.
Through the chair, that is the goal, long-term goal for the chief. The chief is actually, I don't know if he's going to talk about, there's operational opportunity of training, what it takes to actually put a station together. We like to reduce some of those stations and combine them. We actually started setting funds aside because when we looked at early on, this is one of the things we thought, instead of having, the 7, let's figure out what we need for each side. I mean, I want to make sure each side has their north side, south side, west side, have enough stations to provide service. So the chief has definitely been digging into that, and that's the long-term plan.
Thank you.
Just one more.
Councilman Hughes?
No, I'm just saying, the station, we bring up stations, I get that. Do you do these inspections on your stations for stability and structure and everything else? We lost, what was that? 7? And what did we lose like in the last 10 years in stations? How many stations we got?
10 years? Just 7.
Just 7?
Just 7, so yeah. So I can't think of, we lost the old Station 9, but built a new Station 9 right down the street. So yeah, I would say if you want to talk about lost stations, we lost the old 9s, but built a new one down the street, but actually lost a station, 7s.
I've been commenting about 1s for a long time. Is that, you got a lot of longevity with that?
Longevity with 1s?
Yeah.
We are looking at building a new main fire station. Yes, we are looking at because
I'm just saying, is that solid building, or are you looking at that 100-year plus building? How old is it?
1s?
Yes.
I don't think it's 100 years old, but it's got some age on it.
It's just curiosity.
It's out there.
You don't need to. I mean, I don't think it's the way it looks to me. It looks like it's outdated, but
And it is.
we can move on. I didn't mean to disrupt you here.
Councilman Ray?
To the chair, Councilman Hughes, I'm sure Councilman Emeritus Swires would happy recount this in the safety committee meeting, the history of.
I said I moved on. I do not want to hear Swires talk about it.
Hurry up.
He was at 6s when he had my 6s.
Better get this meeting back.
No, he was at 9s.
You sure?
What? Wait a minute. Yes. Swires was at 9s. When I got on the job, he was at 9s.
You better bang that guy.
Yeah, I was at 6s for one reason.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure,
If you could continue with the budget.
Okay.
I was at 6s.
Okay, right now, in this year, our overtime budget is going to be 300 grand. But I know you said 600, but 300,000 is already accounted for with holiday. So we're getting $300,000 for our overtime budget, and I'm almost close to 150K. I will adhere to the rules set out, and at the end of the day, I get those 10 firefighters. I will adhere to what it is council, what is I have on this paper, and what council tells me to do. I will adhere to it. So that means you have to brown out fire stations, 1 or 2 fire stations, then that's what we have to do.
And then will there be media frenzy?
There's going to be a media frenzy regardless.
But that's the figure you have here for the 10 firefighters. That's for 9 months, right?
Right, because it's March right now, yes.
Right, so that's the almost 300,000 difference overtime. But that's still just bad.
It's for 9 months.
So really not, you're making it up. We'll move on.
Go ahead.
Okay, and now comes, I am going to reduce overtime. I would like to prevent the brownouts, and after I talk to my battalion chiefs, we talk to the firefighters, we all have to get on board and just realize that the city is now into a new norm, and we have to all get on board with that new norm, and I will. Like I said before, the SCBA bottles, that is in order for us to stay compliant under NFPA 1852. And you can look that up. It's about SCBA bottles and how often they have to be tested. And the ice commander suits, we discussed that. It's obviously those suits only be used in the wintertime for us to effect the rescue on the ice. Getting the lifts, as I stated before, that enables Donnie to be able to work on the ladder trucks himself versus sending them out. That's all. We already have 4 of them. We're asking for 2 more because the 4 alone can't lift the ladder truck by themselves. So we need 2 more, and then all 6 can lift the ladder truck with no problem. And that's why I'm asking for that. And I explained the turnout gear, why we need to be compliant with that, because that's our only level of protection going into any working fire. And the total proposed is $390,165. That's it. Anybody have any questions? I got you.
Any additional questions from anyone?
Jimmy?
Really? I'm relaxed now. Ready to kill me last year.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
That's 19.
Hey, you want to give it to me, I will take all 19.
Anyone else in the neighborhood that always wanted to agitate?
That's Jimmy.
I would do that. I wouldn't let them do that to me if I was you.
That's Jimmy. That is Jimmy.
Let it go. No, I wouldn't let it. If I was you, if I was you, man. Howard Jones. Howard Jones. Howard Jones did that when I did that today. He always talks in the third person.
Are we waiting for Chief David?
He's out there.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, Chief, come on in.
No, I'm serious.
Thank you, Chief. You're welcome to stay. You may go. Next up on our agenda is the police department. And gentlemen, when you speak, if you may please speak clearly, because the microphone is all the way over here above the TV, and we're zooming hybrid on Zoom. So some of our colleagues are up there. Okay, whenever you guys are ready to get started, you may get started. Do we have a handout from the police?
Yes, we do.
That's why you made it small.
Well, I thought that was gonna be on screen. I didn't realize you guys had a screen.
We cut their paper budget, so they had
Actually did. What a sheet.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want me to lead off?
Yeah, Chief, go ahead.
Through the chair, the officers of the Youngstown Police Department are committed to reducing crime and improving the quality of life for all who live, work, and visit the city of Youngstown. They demonstrate unwavering pride in their daily performance and adhere to the department's core values of pride and commitment, professionalism and integrity, service and excellence, responsibility and accountability, fairness and diversity. The Youngstown Police Department provides a variety of services 24 hours a day, emergency responses to 911 calls, other services including community policing, training, vice, gun reduction, and traffic enforcement, etc. Total calls from 2017 were 66,953. In 2018, there were 72,934 calls. 2019, there were 62,635 calls for service. 2020, there were 74,476 calls for service.
Excuse me, through the chair.
Councilman Hughes.
I get this, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but this is budget here. I think we really should get into figures
I just wanted to give a presentation. Okay, if you don't want to hear it.
Councilman
Through
Ray.
the chair, we're all not sure, I mean, how many slides is it? We're all not experts on this area.
At least 5 slides.
Okay. You want to cut them all, or?
We had them before.
Okay.
The chair.
I will assist. Okay, so if we start with the first page, it looks like this. We're gonna start talking about the uniform division first. So right now, total headcount that I started as my baseline does not mean that we have this many firefighters right now. I'm sorry, apologize. Please. My baseline for the budget when I began was we were working with 136. We're not at 136 right now, we're actually less than that. But the number that when we were starting from, that we were gonna, the request was the chief said, and the mayor agreed that we would add 10 police officers. So that would take our patrol ranks from 95 to 105. When you break that down, we have roughly 2-to-1 brass to patrol, because under council ordinance, we have the ability to have 41 Y-Pro police officers, which is the breakdown between your captains, your lieutenants, and your detectives. The increase for those 8 months to the budget for 2022 is going to be an additional $277,000. The number I gave you earlier, right, we provided you with the fire department, was the police total. When you look at that for 12 months, for those 10 police officers for their total payroll. So if you turn the page, you can see that reflected in the total wages when it comes to police uniform, which is going to be your division 2002. So it should be the page right behind it in blue, and it's up in the left-hand corner, it'll say police uniform. So when you compare the difference, what the difference is saying to based on last year's adopted budget and based on this year's adopted budget, that is going to be the difference between the budget. That's all that number is showing. But ultimately, what's driving that difference is at the time last year, we weren't adding positions. Our headcount was slightly lower. And so as a result, on paper, it looks to be $600,000 more. As I spoke to you earlier, the breakdown is actually going to be less when you look at where we were. Again, this is on paper, because if you come over to your far left and look at the annual expenses, you see your actual expenses worked out to $7,850,000. But yet we had budgeted 8.2 because there was the chance that we were going to, under the COPS program, hire police officers. And at the end, never materialized. I had to build that into the baseline because that was the budget that so in the end, so the actual expending was roughly 728. And as you come down to the bottom and you look at the total division cost, we spent 14.7 for uniformed police officers in 2021. We are budgeting to spend 15.9. And the big reason is the combination of the request on the capital side of vehicles by the police department, which the mayor is in support of. We have that broken down by how many new versus used cars.
That's maybe 7 new cars with additional, hopefully 10 used cars for unmarked, and those are officers who are on call.
So that is what is driving that year-over-year increase from your actual to your department budget is going to be the increase in wages and benefits associated with those 10 officers, And in addition, the capital needs that the chief outlined that the mayor and the administration is asking council to support. Are there any questions with regards to the uniform division?
Councilman Hughes.
Getting back to the cars, that we see that had some language on that in previous time periods. But purpose of the cars, we're going to be using these 7 cars?
Through the chair, I may ask or speak for the chief. We just purchased, I believe, 7 cars last year, and to outfit a brand new blue fleet car cruiser, which people are used to seeing one marked up, it cost us nearly $420,000 at the time we purchased the cars and outfit them. It's nearly $60,000 a car now to outfit a cruiser, and we are not going high end. And that's counting we spend at least $10,000 or nearly on just putting radios and computers in the cars to complete the cars. So we are estimating off of last year's purchase for 2022 models, which we're going to buy this year if you council approves, it's going to be the same price of $420,000 statewide if we go with the state bid and then the build out price.
We have a system in place to replace, to annually or biannually replace cars. What's in place for that?
Do you want me to? Yes. Through the chair, generally, in the perfect world, we would like to buy 5 new ones every year. But we didn't buy any new big police cruisers since 2020. So we were 2 years behind. Right now, most of our fleet is being used on secondary cars. I should say fleet cars that were previously primary beat cars that were pushed back to extra beat cars, and that's kind of what right now our major fleet is being used at right now. We have a lot of cars that are broken down.
Yes, please.
We have 2020, seems like we're having an extra problems with the all-wheel drive. They're going down quite a bit quicker than other models, so we're having some problems. But in the perfect world, we would like to buy 5 new ones every year, but we know that with the financial hardships the cities go through, that we kind of have to pick and choose when we can buy them.
So what does that mean? You have an intent to place them as do a rotation? Or?
Well, that would be the ultimate goal, is to replace these cars every 100,000 miles.
Is that what you're doing?
We're trying to. When we did a look over our new vehicle cruisers, so the marked cruisers, they average over 110,000 miles on average. Some of them that we have on the road right now as primary beat cars are nearly 200,000 miles. We are trying to purchase 100,000 mile guarantees, warranties on them to offset the cost of fixing these cruisers, which adds another $3,000 to the cruiser price. But we think it's well worth it because we run these cars 24 hours a day. That's one of the reasons why we go through as many cars as we do, because we have to run them and operate them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we don't have time to generally take them offline and do a lot of maintenance on them, at least give them time to not run all the time. So we go through marked fleet cars fairly fast as far as using the wear of life out of it.
Councilwoman Davis.
Yes, to the chair. So the cars that you're requesting are in addition to the 7 cars that we've already authorized for the community police officers?
Yes.
Through the chair, Councilman Davis, we purchased those 7 vehicles out of the reserve that was in the OptiTraffic fund that is now exhausted.
I know.
But that's where the purchases came from, just so that these 7 requests is coming actually out of the police department budget that is subsidized by the general fund.
And that's at the tune of $400,000?
Each vehicle is, through the chair, each vehicle is $60,000, and then we have $10,000 for the radio chargers that need to then go into those vehicles.
Right. We wanted to add, through the chair, we wanted to add a way to charge portable radios. We don't have that way in this right now in the police department. A lot of times what we're finding when officers are working overtime, their portable radios are dying. So it's approximately $83 a car to put a portable radio charger inside the vehicle.
So that's $10,000 total, not per car.
No, 83, yeah, when we did the math for outfitting all of our cruisers and unmarked cars, it was gonna be about nearly $10,000.
Did you have another follow-up?
No, that's okay. Thank you.
I just had a comment, if I could. How's the 800s working out?
The new system, it has some glitches. The CAD, or the COG, I should say, for the community governments is looking into trying to figure out why we've had some issues with the operability of the system. Overall, it works fairly well, but there is still some setbacks in it from time to time. So we're going to try to look at ways of improving the system so we don't lose coverage. We had a major breakdown approximately 4 or 5 weeks ago where we lost radio control traffic for about 3 hours in the whole county. We could not dispatch. So we had to go off at a system that we had from the old days, and basically officers couldn't hear us past Indianola and maybe certain parts of the west side and all that stuff. We had to use telephones to contact them. So there is still some problems with the new technology, but we're getting there, we're trying to work through it.
Kyle?
Through the chair, any additional questions on police uniform, which is of course, the largest component of the police department budget?
Take the cars out, what's the increase from the last year?
Well, if you remove the cars, that's, and the purchasing of the unmarked used cars, that's going to be $530,000, so roughly $400,000 increase, which ultimately ties back to, when you look at year over year, we're up 1.2. You remove 500,000, there's a $700,000 increase, and that's being driven by, you're going to be your wages and your benefits. Because remember, we now are going to be paying more in a pension because we have a higher payroll. And that payroll is increased because of us hiring 10 new officers. So that is what's driving those costs. In addition, you have, remember, overtime was cut at the end of the budget process last year. We're making sure that we're funding at the level that we had initially put it back in 2021 at 1.1. Yes, they ended up using 1.4, but as a result of what occurred where they had to mandate police officers staying more than their normal shifts, that's what drove that. And the hope is by bringing on these 10 additional police officers, that is going to eliminate the need for the department to have to tackle that. It's important to appreciate right now, the police officers are not even patrol officers, not even at 95.
No, I believe we're at 87.
So there are 87. So that overtime cost really escalated in the last quarter of 2021 because as those numbers dropped, these police officers were required to work additional shifts, which were always above and beyond their normal 8-hour day. So that was all at overtime rates.
And just for clarification, these additional 10 hires are going to be patrol officers, like doing a beat, like not in a special division?
Through the chair, yeah, these will be patrol officers.
Through the chair, just so you appreciate, you're going to see within the media as these announcements are made that we're actually going to be hiring more than 10 because when the budget was put together, the baseline at the time, the start of the new year was 95. Since the baseline was created, we're down to 87. So in addition to those 10, to get us back to the baseline, we have to hire another 7. So right now, and then there's probably going to be some additional retirements. So we want to be able to, the baseline number is going to be 145. That's excluding the chief, 145 police officers working for the city of North.
Anita?
Through the chair, for Chief Davis, for next week's safety committee meeting, you can bring those stats, but I also want you to bring a list or total of the number of officers who are working secondary employment and whether or not they are taking a city vehicle with them on that secondary employment. I want that information for next week's safety committee meeting.
Through the
Thank
chair, okay.
Thank you.
Moving on to the non-uniform, you're gonna first see the payroll page, which identifies the positions. Now, this one page is broken down for non-uniform and garage. We'll turn back to that when we get to the garage component division of the department. But as you can see, it's made up of roughly 19 full-time employees. These employees are either in management or work in AFSCME. They are the clerks, they are the social worker and the project analyst with regards to grants, and then the chief's secretary. The operating cost for that unit, if you look at the actual blue and white page, you can see that only $6,500 is requested for rental. Most of the operating cost is, of course, their budget for overhead and benefits. Do you have any questions with regards to the non-uniform unit of the police department?
Thank
Chewy.
you. Is there a baseline for them?
To the chair. We've been around 19 for the last 2 years. Where there are changes, as you can see, is the police clerks part-time. We fund those numbers because what happens on occasion, you get people, because of the time it takes to train somebody, one, you bring somebody on as part-time. But then if somebody chooses to leave the operation and go work someplace else where they may get paid more, that's where we run into our dilemma, because that drives overtime. Because how long does it take to train somebody to become where they could do full-time 911 service?
3 months at minimum.
So there's that difficulty of that turnover when someone leaves. So trying to get somebody part-time is difficult, but once the person has been trained and is part-time, they're normally the person that then gets promoted up if somebody else leaves 911. It is difficult. I'm sorry, not 911, but the police clerks, but as you can see, we've been consistent with total of 19, but when it comes to the clerks, there's 12. And one of those clerks works for Guy Burney in the in SERB, which is now going to be called, Mayor, help me out.
You'll be served.
Yeah, okay, community, but that person is still in the payroll under the police department, just like both in police and fire, the person that is the computer service person in each of those departments is in the finance department's payroll. That person is not counted, even though they report to the chiefs, they're under chief or Rick Deek's unit, which is in finance. Those, this is the budget request, as you can see, it's higher than the actual 2021, and the bulk of that is going to be in the wages overtime. Now, the hope is that we don't have people leave, but if people do leave, that's what drives the overtime. So yes, I did build it in because our concern is potentially the county could be paying a higher rate. And if that is the case, sometimes they lure the police clerks away from us as they do with the 911 operators. That is why we built that buffer in. To make sure that at the end of the year, because again, if we don't have it and we utilize those funds someplace else, I have to certify that we have the resources. And so that is why it's better to have it in there. Doesn't mean that it should be spent, but if it does get spent, I at least have made sure on submitting the budget that we have at least a buffer in there to protect us from being over and then not being in compliance with the budget.
I have a question for Chief.
Yep.
With 10 additional hires, will this? Oh, I'm sorry, Anita. Go ahead.
Yes, I just have to advise that I'm going to have to leave this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. With the 10 additional hires, will this ensure that we have our community police officers back doing community police work?
Through the chair, you still have your community police officers, they're just helping out.
I kind of interrupt you.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we need to go through that, make this good.
Enjoyed it.
I know
Ask them to recap.
you. Yeah, I understood that.
But I guess guess maybe I'll be more specific. At what point, how many officers do we need to have in order to have our community police officers doing what we intended community policing to do?
Chief, you want me to-
Yes.
We believe with hiring, getting us back to 100 full-time patrol officers, that would more than adequately enhance the community policing is philosophy that we all want, where they have more time to spend working on community problems, solving problems, working with the council people to make sure that police services that may not fit the traditional police services are being looked into. Juvenile complaints, litter complaints, whatever it may be, that there's somebody there that's trying to solve that problem, other than a police car showing up, hoping to spend 10, 15 minutes on it, and they drive through it and move on. So that's the goal. I know that the chief is adamant on working on that problem to make sure that we all get back to the comfortable level of a community police unit that's operating full-time in that capacity only.
And just a question, so if those particular officers are not able to do, say, per se, the community policing work that we wanted, are they still the officers that are going to be receiving those 7 vehicles that we purchased for them?
Through the chair, yes.
I just want to make sure, because that's what they're for those 7 officers.
That's correct.
Okay, Councilman Hughes.
I think we came to an agreement prior, definitely, and meeting with here, Captain. And the community police, when it was supposed to be, how it was supposed to be assigned to each ward, each council person. That's the agreement we had with the traditional style of community police, not the hybrid, if I can say that everybody's community police. Clearly, we understood that orders was kept and commitment was given. And I believe that's what the council was referring to. And not how hard we are this and how hard we are that. Now, I didn't, when we were going over speeches about all the work that community police is doing, I tried to avoid that, just like I'm trying to avoid everybody's commitment to a process that's simple to do and to carry on. It's really not rocket science. I think you know that's my word. I think it's not rocket science. It's that community police is community police. And at this point, when in the past, a year and a half or so ago, that's what we were referring to. A year ago, that's what we were referring to. The community police that were assigned to each ward to work with our community organizations and talk to the people, not stand up against the wall and frisk them. We wanted the community police talking to our community, and that's what happened. Now, we can go on and on about the difference in who's committed and who's not. Truly, you're not committed, because we've already had it in place. We already agreed to it. We already accepted money for the community police to do the job, the federal money to do the job that we thought it was for. And it seemed to be acknowledged on this, and I give Chief Davis his out. He was new, and the previous chief was the main focus of what's going on, and he put all that aside. We came to an agreement. That's all we're saying, and we were just as short again as we are. So, I think what I probably do, and the reason why I have a hard time agreeing with moving forward, mainly because that's where I am, but I have a hard time moving forward, is because commitments was made. We expected, we had them, or we maybe, and they took them away, and even, but the point still being is, that's the system we have now. One day, somehow, this administration is going to have to get back on board You know, or just deny you're gonna give us community police. Just say you're not gonna do it. But don't Twitter and Twitter.
Mayor,
Through the chair, one of the things, if we got to the capacity, and anyone who works in YPD, you can explain, if we got to 105, we were at 105, I think that wouldn't be an issue. The problem is, we get to 105 and we get 5 people who fall off. I mean, the attrition rate is just so high. So every opportunity we can, now this year, we're gonna try to do a hiring practice twice a year to give the civil service test other than just once a year, because we're not casting a large net. But if we can stay at 105, what you're saying, that commitment is there. But we need to make sure that we want to have a patrol out on the street as well. So if we can do it and the attrition rate, stays there, or we can continue to keep the officers in the pipeline, we'll continue to hire them. What did we have last test? How many we have, and then how many we end up with that were qualified to come on?
I think 30-something people signed up to take the test, 17 passed, and we're gonna be hiring 5 here, sure.
Just a follow up. And you really get my good. The point still being is that that's not, we understood that. You could have very easily said, we're not gonna accept community police money. You could very easily say, we're not gonna use community police until we add this. That wasn't said. I understand what you're saying, and I understand your clarification on it, but it's still not clear. For fact, for anyone, you said you was gonna give us community police. We told you we wanted community police. You don't believe in community police is what you're trying to hold back. You don't believe community police, and it's a area thing and everything else. This department has one thing in mind. They focus on, trying to put the handcuffs on and thinking that that's the only thing that we can do to reduce crime, put people in jail. And that's just not that. That's not everybody's belief.
Mayor.
Just through the chair, in direct response, that could be further from the truth, that we do believe in community police. But we also know the day-to-day operations of getting the patrol out there, it has to be at a certain level. We're committed to doing so. I know the chief and his staff are committed to doing so. That's why we're making every effort we can to have enough men and women out there on our regular patrol so we can have community police. So I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm on the same page with you. It's just how do we get there?
To the chair, just a short one. You want to get the guys out there, community police is out there. That's the same thing. That's your police. They're all the police. You trying to say that you got the knowledge, you're gonna have to patrol. That's the whole thing. We've been years, we're not social workers, we're not this and that, but we really are. The peoples are out there back and forth. You got one thing, you trade guns and male blacks on TV. That's what the whole thing is all about. Crime reduction, we had previous meetings you had, what caused crime? The whole world in your administration has it, cause of crime is male blacks and guns. 2 things, that's it. And when you send people down the street to get the male black and the guns, that's what your goals are. You got nothing else but that. So what I'm saying is, put people down to determine the system. Change it, let them talk, let them help, let them look into, let them see what's going on in the neighborhood. There's an alternative to arresting the male black and trying to get every gun you can as a cop, and then making billions every week. All I'm saying is that if you got something different than thinking that young male blacks and guns is everything you're trying to go after, that's all you're trying to go after. Try to think out of the box here and let us talk to you. I know my constituents much rather have a police can stop and talk to them and not trying to find a male black with a gun. That's just my take. I'm going to preface that with saying this. I tried to avoid this when, in the beginning of this, don't tell me about your community policing. Just tell me what you need and let's go on with the budget. Now you want to brag about stuff that's not really going on there. That's what I'm saying. You want to brag about an intent that's not really happening. Now, I've seen it over the years. I've been a police officer as long as anybody in this room. That's all I'm saying.
To the chair.
Chief.
and this is no respect, sir. You and I go back. We were in the Black Knights Police Association together over 40 years ago. And we fought against social injustice and against that, and you know that. You very well know that. And today, your behavior towards me, I'm telling you, I've never been more disrespected from any white man. And you and I are friends, like I said, who fought together side by side for social injustice. You need to be ashamed of yourself.
Okay, if we can get back on track regarding the budget, I understand that we're facing budgetary, issues and concerns, and we're doing the best with what we can. I think some of the frustration stems from just always hearing about the community police program. And since I came on board in 2016, we have yet to really have a community police program as it was outlined to be. And it's just confusing to our residents. They hear that we have a community police officer, but we don't have one. We have one, but we don't. They have to do this and that. So I think just more of a clear message to say we have the intent of having community police, but however, the reality is we can't really do such a program until maybe X, Y, and Z, and then not, put funding towards that, and then not to use that. Like my concern is always, even with the CBDG funding, I don't feel we're using it as we should when it comes to that. So I think it's just kind of a combination of all of that frustration. So as we sit here and talk about the budget and hiring 10 more officers, we just want to know where those officers are going to. I think we all have the right intent. Maybe, we're all very passionate. I think we all want what's best, and kind of here, trying to brainstorm what we think would be the best of, best use of 10 more officers. Councilor Joe.
No, I think Jimmy had the passion of expressing that about his concerns, and you were saying, show us with your actions that the community is a priority. And that's what the summary there is. If we can get back to getting on track with the other areas of the budget, I think that will keep us on track for sure.
Chair, can I move on to the garage division? What I want to point out here, not so much in the payroll and benefits, but it's at the bottom of the blue and white page. It's going to be our fuel and gas. You can see that there is a $47,000 increase. It's critical that we live within this budget as best we can. This is an unknown. We've tried to insulate it as best we can. The department, myself, Captain Foley, and the chief, and lieutenant, are going to make sure that we stay on top of watching that, because again, as this fleet size grows, we've got to be cognizant of the fact that gas prices are quite high. We don't want to allow this to get out of control, but we have built in a sizable buffer. We're going to reevaluate this at mid-year, because we'll know where gas prices will be, in June, and then looking back how gas prices change between January and June, we'll be able to evaluate, okay, what's that activity going to be like if prices are still elevated, or if prices are coming down, and what we have left. But we're going to stay on top of that, but this is one of the few departments that it's critical just because of the size of the fleet. That is the only major change within that unit. Do you have any questions on the garage operations?
Jimmy?
The gas, are we doing anything to maybe think out of the box about using the gas? Maybe how it's being, how we doing business by the gas? I understand it's.
I think, to the chair, right now, I don't know if you've seen over the last 2 days, oil is in a bear market, which sounds incredible, but that means that there was a change in price by 20%. So oil hit 130. Today, oil is down to $93 a barrel. So the hope is that this is going to be a really significant short-time anomaly. Right now, I can't, if I was a betting man, I knew this for sure, I would be, doing that. But I'm hopeful that we're going to start to see that additional easing. Question's going to be how long are gas prices going to stay around this $4 level. But I know that the department head and the captains are cognizant of this, because again, if this starts to get out of control within their budget, we're going to have to maneuver by moving other funds, and that would be taking away from some of the things that they do need. Because again, this is a tight budget, meaning there isn't much room left outside of what's been requested and what we're appropriating. But I believe right now, things are okay based on what's been happening. If those trends continue to move in that direction, I think we're gonna be fine. But if things continue at that, yes, it's gonna require changes, and the police department is going to address that.
Councilman Wright?
To the chair, and keeping in spirit with the trying to reduce fuel, I know that we have better technology cruisers, better batteries, all those things. I don't know that, do we need to be leaving these cruisers running all the time, or is that a habit? Are we better at that? Because you'll see these things run 24/7. The batteries, the technology has had to prove we're not driving Crown Vics anymore. The things we heard.
Through the chair, we are, most of our unmarked cars now are going down to 4 cylinders. We've been doing that over the last few years, Malibus, Focuses. We're looking at Ford Fusions possibly to start replacing some of the older fleet as we're going, so that will obviously help. Something that we can address, we do it periodically, and unfortunately we don't always enforce it as much as we should, is that we should have officers shutting down these cruisers in between calls more often than they do. A lot of the times the excuse is that, well, we have to reboot the computers back up. And I believe, after speaking with our IT people, that there's a 30-minute window of where that computer stays functional before it will shut itself down. And officers don't like to wait 10, sometimes 5-10 minutes, whatever it may take to get rebooted back up online. So that is something that we need to do a better job at. It's something that the chief and I can discuss and with the patrol command. They say, listen, when these cars are parked for more than 5 minutes, 10 minutes, they need to be shut off. And that's something that we need to do a better job at.
Thank you. I know it's hard to change your culture and your habits when you've done something so long.
Through the chair, just to add, so to go along with the captain, in the past, I'm not 100% familiar with past operations in the garage, but the cruisers that we're getting now, we call them street ready. So basically, we're not adding on and having aftermarket wiring and different things. It's going to be one package. So we're maximizing. We went over stuff like the battery tenders and different things. So the cars are going to show up with the newest equipment assembled, ready to put the keys in and drive off. I think that's going to make a giant difference in a lot of that efficiency in the vehicles.
Great, thank you.
Are there any more questions with the garage? And if not, we can move on quickly to 911. This is the other division that is under the responsibility of the police chief. Payroll, if you look, we have 4 supervisors. We have 1 as a part-time. We found by having a part-time that helped alleviate some of the overtime. Last year's overtime came in under budget. We had budgeted $90,000. Going to keep the budget where it is. But the hope is, again, with a full staff of 16, all of them trained. I think 1 is still, or a few are still moving up through the steps, those last 3 that are on the bottom. But hopefully by mid-year, those next to bottom 2 will have met their 3-year window and gained enough experience to see a wage increase and be able to meet some of those more difficult requirements of working 911 and then also being able to pick up extra overtime shifts when needed. One of the problems we have in the department is it's just difficult when people have personal issues and family needs. Most of our 911 operators are women. So we got to be cognizant that there are some times when we just have to make sacrifices, and so there are people being asked to stay over, and it seems from my understanding within our negotiations right now for payroll, for the union, that is something that they tend to do well, work together and cover one another, but by doing that, it means that, there's going to be a higher level of overtime. So that's what drives that, but it's unique just because of the circumstances of having to work. This is a 24/7 operation. There has to be somebody there all the time. And if something comes up, people are asked to stay over and they have to. Are there any questions? Because if you look at the operating budget, What's driving that increase is on the payroll side between wages, part-time, and the medical insurance premiums. The operating costs are in line with where they were for the 2021 expenses, and we don't foresee any additional issues where they're going to need funding outside of what has already been requested.
Through the chair, I do want to add that we are in the process of hiring. We hired one part-timer, call taker. She's 2 weeks into the process. We think because she is working part-time, it's probably going to take us a minimum of 3 months to get her up and ready to go on her own. We have 2 more in the pipeline, are going through voice stress right now and some other background checks. So hopefully when we do get overtime, planned overtime, if we know ahead of time through scheduling and vacations, that we can replace them with a part-time staff to reduce the time and a half rate. That's the goal. I got reassigned over there about 3 or 4 months ago. We're also in the process of maybe looking for another part-time supervisor. We only have 4 that try to operate 7 days a week, 3 shifts a day, and through vacation and personal days and occasional sick day, we're pushing a lot of work onto these 4 individuals, which kind of frightens me a little bit as a supervisor. But so we are trying to find avenues to augment our current staff and keep it at a reduced rate.
Is there more questions? That is the police department and 911 overview.
Yes. So we are trying to get one part-time additional.
Through the chair, we have 1 we hired, Councilman, and we're trying to hire an additional 2 more to give us the opportunities. Obviously, when you hire part-timers, you're kind of work around their schedules, obviously, so we're trying to get at least 3. That way it'll give us more flexibility. When we know we have some openings, we can give them a call at least a week ahead of time. If not, we have 3, we have a call up an hour before shift. We'll try to get them called first.
To the chairs. It really doesn't answer. I just want, these part-timers, 32-hour part-timers or?
To the chair, when it comes to part-time within 911, they're kind of like the bailiffs of security, where they may only work 4 hours 1 day, 1 week. So it's not like they're automatically guaranteed 32. It's when there's a need, they would be scheduled. So when you look at the budget, I showed $28,000. I have to ultimately come up with what I believe we're going to use, but it could be one person that only make $4,000 or $5,000, or another one could make 12. It all depends on how many hours they actually
So
work.
they don't get paid unless they work.
Correct.
So why not try to bring on as many as you can?
Through the chair. Because ultimately, if somebody wants to work and they can't get the hours because we're sharing and spreading them around, how are we going to be able to maintain all these part-timers if they're not getting 10 hours they like? So it's a fine, balance there. But first, we're trying to make sure that we can at least find 3 out there that want to be part-time and be willing to fill in some of those gaps that exist when people call off or on vacation or sick.
Any other questions?
Can I address one more
Yeah.
thing? I spoke to Clerk of Council Valencia earlier today. We're going to have to schedule a meeting either to take place next week after the budget meeting on Tuesday night or earlier in the following week, which will be the last week of the month, to pass this budget before March 31st. So if council would at least consider that and work with the other council members to come up with a date, that would be fantastic.
Councilman Ray.
Through the chair, if you could refresh me, are we done with all the departments, or do we have left?
To the chair, no, we have another scheduled budget meeting next Tuesday night and do water and wastewater.
So we have water and waste left. And then, if I may say, Paul, I know there were lots of requests made, and, I think, what requests were done by the body versus, I could say all kind of crazy stuff, and, Sasha could as well. I mean, is it the wish of the body or individual councilperson's purview that we have, a majority of the body requesting these changes to the budget? So I don't know if we need to go through some of those, because, we probably need to sort some of that out, because there's been a lot of wishes made. But
Through the chair, I need at least 5 of you to approve the budget, because if it's only 4, we're then going to get knocked on our audit that we didn't have a balanced budget in place, which we don't want to see, because it doesn't look good for neither council or the administration to not amend that deadline.
Mike?
So if I could just, yeah, so I mean, if there's some that we didn't have agreement, I mean, you know, we could have different things, we need to agree on them before we put them in the budget, to pass the budget, so we'll have to probably come to consensus on some of those. I've heard some things from, you know, increasing resurfacing by millions to, you know.
And that's why I shared tonight this document with you, to show you right now where there is no room unless you make cuts to then increase other line items in the budget.
Yeah, because to reduce, if I may, reduce fuel costs, I think, and we have all this parkland, we should get horses and feed them and, you know, have a mounted police unit downtown, probably would save a bunch of money, but that's my idea. I don't know if you go along with that.
I mean, that's John Arden, what he goes along with.
I mean, he's.
Bring back the bicycle.
He's skilled at scuba, I don't know if he's, you know, his equestrian skills as well, so.
That's me.
Yeah, and it seems, because the next item on the agenda is to set the special meeting, but we don't even have enough people here to set that, so we'll have to make sure to set that next Tuesday.
Or is it possible it even gets discussed tomorrow night in council? Can you at least,
Yeah.
we can bring it up to you. Is that something that we can do tomorrow night while we have everybody present?
Yeah. Mike?
Any restrictions, I mean, just to know, well, since we're discussing the next meeting and then the final meeting, we needed, the last day to pass is,
31st.
okay, so working backwards from there, just looking at everyone's calendar, you know, we hate to do the last day, but.
And ultimately, I guess if you wanted to, and council as a group would agree, you could have a meeting where we discuss the budget again on March 29th and then pass it on the 31st, if it had to be. That's your call as a body, if you'd like to meet twice in that week.
Well, we'll discuss it, tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think having another final meeting, I think, would be beneficial. Okay, the next hearing is set for Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022 at 5 p.m. And may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.